into Matlock that I feel what was interesting. There's a lot of things that have been interesting. I've been treating Matlock a little bit like a science experiment at times. And one of the things that I've liked about it is that it is bingeable, but it's
Yes.
better if you don't binge it, I think, because there's this localized amnesia that the show relies on, that you may or may not care about certain things at certain times. Because, you know, just free associating with you for a second, that like what it's very instinctive for collaborators in the art department to want to make the worlds for all the characters like soap opera style. Like this person has a home and this person has a den and this person has a bathroom. Matlock doesn't work like that. The Matlock is following a spotlight that is shined on Maddie Matlock. And when the shine moves to another thing,
Mhm.
that is when you develop that thing. And it almost always has a very close connection to Maddie. So you're seeing it through Maddie's spotlight. And we forget about things intentionally or unintentionally, things that matter so much, like Shay, for instance, in the earlier part of the season. Then the spotlight moves away from that. And I find that very fascinating as a storytelling from a designer standpoint, that like I always have to sit back for a second and be like, oh, okay, what is the thing that this script is pushing Maddie through? Because it doesn't necessarily have to be, and that's not necessarily economic based. Sometimes people are like, oh, we don't need that. We'll save money on that. That's not what I
Right.
mean. I mean, from a story standpoint, it's very focused on what Maddie's story is. And then there's these kind of card tricks, these reveals, like flipping over a tarot card when you show the audience just a little bit more of that world. And usually it's a little bit foggy. I've been enjoying that study and how people have really resonated. That seems to be the thing that people love to talk about.
Yeah, I do think too, because you had, what is it, 18 episodes? You had such a chance to, with her cases and everything, to give different outlooks of people and where she goes and their environments and how she is in their environments. Like you had a very long, now that we say long series run to do that, which I thought was great too, because from the first episode to the last episode, she seems like a different person in a sense of like she cares now about the people that she thought she'd hate, or she, things like that. And I think in the lighting and in the sets and everything and wardrobe, they reflect, especially her hair coming down and like, I don't know, it reflects a lot the development of these characters throughout the season.
I think Jenny Erman would be incredibly proud to hear you just say that, because that is, in meetings and pilot meetings and studio meetings and pitches, I don't think she's ever said this, but I've interpreted her explanation as like, do you remember that thing that was like we had when we were, 'cause you can see my hands, where you like
Oh
KISS
yeah.
and then you flip
Yeah, I never knew how to make one
uh,
of those.
I think that's called foldogami or something.
Yeah, yeah.
That's how the show is operating. And so then you fold over this part, and that is what, Maddie kind of has a passion for Billy and Sarah now. And Maddie's feeling incredibly empowered again by her career. And she, got a chance for the first time to be in court. She was a litigation lawyer. And so even though or sorry, a real estate lawyer before she became this litigation, lawyer. And there's something really that is just actually a small part of the show, and it actually is a big part of the show. So it's like taking a hamburger and shoving potato chips in it and then smashing it, because there's so much going on inside the stories there, and that is fun. And that's it reflected in the design. And a lot of the choices that I've made, or that the team has made, come out of what I called the spy component of the show. For
Mm,
those people who may have not seen it, the show has a large like looking in quality, and usually it's from the perspective of Maddie, but sometimes Maddie needs to be watched, so you're kind of like the silent sniper, or the
yeah.
the voyeur. And so the amount of glass and the obstacles that we put, and I have put in between, the camera and the scene, are very intentional. I mean, there's very little about the show that's not intentional, and they all have stories behind them. I mean, not just narratively for the story, for the actual script, but because the set was inherited, which is a whole nother thing we'll talk
Yeah.
about uh,
But
down the road.
there's great use of your designed sets, giving them point of views for the characters. That's one of the things I noticed, that your DP, I feel like did take advantage of a lot of like even in the walk and talks and throughout the whole huge set that you have for this law office, taking advantage of what you gave them. Like there's sometimes I'm like, where are they? Well, have we been in this room before? Like that's amazing. Like
I love that you're saying that because that's the full Dagami. Like this, it's on
yeah,
two sound stages or was in season one. So we changed and flipped and moved so that it felt a little bit more like when you play the game Clue, you move from the conservatory to the kitchen to the secret passage. Like that's a device of the show's set and it's working and people like it.
yeah,
But the DP, let's talk about that for a second. It was John Tanzer and Jim Bagadonis. Jim Bagadonis is, and then Craig in Canada did the pilot. The lighting is very, very interesting, I found. And the set really gleams. And what's fun
yeah.
about that is that the intention was to make CBS a shiny, glossy magazine TV show. Like we set out to do that. And it looks like that, or at least I feel like it looks like that.
Yeah. I mean, you're giving great shafts of light with the sets that you have and designed. And then also the furniture, I love reflection. A lot of DPs aren't into it. I love giving reflections and mirrors and like this high gloss table, conference table that we're looking at, like the way it catches the backing even is fantastic.
Yeah,
And
that I mean that really is Jim and John kind of plugging into that because again, I agree with you. I've had so many DPs, hate white or don't like reflection or can't stand, gleam. And it's just like, yeah, but it's part of our everyday life,
right.
number one. And two, this is a show about self-identity, like who you are. Are you this person other people have made you? Are you the person you want to be? Are the person you're lying? So I couldn't design the show without reflection. And
Yeah.
it's in a lot of sets.
I do want to step back for 1 second and just ask when you got Matlock and are designing, and I know you were fantastic about repurposing things that you had, but what was it? Was there anything that you wanted to like ode to the previous versions of Matlock?
That's a great question. So the first part is I got on board 18 days before the first day of filming, including weekends. So the prep was
God, oh my
very intense.
God.
And so it was a fast flip. And the challenge with oding to the original Matlock was that when I watched the show, I watched, portions. I didn't watch the whole original, to be honest with you, but I did watch some. I was looking for that thing. Some shows have a thing. Like if we were to
Yeah,
recreate The Office today, we'd have to have, Michael's desk decorations and you'd have to have world's best boss coffee cup or
right.
something like that. I didn't find anything except lamps. Like I know that sounds silly, but the set decorator in on Matlock or the whoever the DP was very into lamps. And if you watch the original show and you go into his office, I think I counted 11 lamps in his office. So like that could be a time, the camera, the lighting, there could be a lot of reasons why that happened. And so, I started off being like, we're gonna have lamps everywhere.
Oh my God, I'd be like, Adam, it's not a lamp store. That's my biggest thing. It's not a lamp store. This is not a lamp store. I'm not.
Yeah, we got a lot of lamps. And that started off that way. And then the only really thing that we've landed on is in one episode, Maddie's in a seersucker suit and
Right.
then there's tube socks and then a hot dog. But there hasn't really been a lot of pledge allegiance to the original. I
Yeah.
love that you have that ready to go.
Yeah.
And it's such a fun moment. Like
Yeah.
that's when Jenny Erman shines because dreams are reality and they bend the other way. So like that was such a fun moment in the show. And then, there's another kind of dream later on in the series that is also a surprise that for me harkens back to Misery. Like Kathy Bates's background kind of came
Oh,
back to haunt her when she stands at the end of her bed when Edwin's in bed. So
yeah.
like there's these and then there's another moment where they reflect back to another movie. I'm blanking on which one, but it's when Julian and Shay are in a parking lot and we got a period car that was
Oh,
matching whatever movie we were matching. But
fried green
um
tomatoes.
I haven't worked that in, but the thing that I'm trying, and I love that you picked that one. There's the cutout of flowers on the wall in Fried Green Tomatoes nursing home
Oh,
room.
right, right.
And I've been trying to work that in, and we did have a nursing home in season one,
Yeah.
I'm kicking myself a little bit that I didn't push it further, but it really the tone of that scene was somber, so it didn't feel like the right place to do that. But I'm always looking for moments to like because people love Kathy Bates so
Yeah.
much. I mean, I'm included in that. I want to give the fans that kind of delight. I just it has to present itself when it feels appropriate.
I mean, you've told me, but did she have any influence or input of like things that she specifically wanted for her character or
I can't say that I would say an object. Like I can't point to like she wanted this coffee cup. But
mm,
I will say two stories about working with her. Before I had met her, um, I had read that, there's kind of the Meryl Streep story that Meryl Streep wants everything in her purse that that character would have. Have you read about that or heard about
yeah,
that?
yeah.
So I believe that Kathy is similar, although I didn't find that published. But where I picked up on that is if you watch, just pick scenes from her most iconic movies, this is an actress who's very capable of doing something and meaning she does what reality is and like she's moving things or picking things or signing things or whatever she needs to be doing to help you feel connected to that character that they're real. Some actors don't do that. I mean, there's a
Yeah,
lot of scenes we watch where actors are doing nothing, but even you and I right now we're like, oh, we got to get ready for our day, there's 5 seconds of silence, we'll do something, like that's how everybody operates their life, or I got to charge my phone.
yeah.
So when I was thinking about the world that Maddie is in, I wanted to make sure it didn't have that staged look.
Mm,
Although sometimes it does, I will admit that. Sometimes it looks very curated and sometimes it looks very precise. And that's because Jacobson Moore has a whole nother side story. But when I get back to Kathy, it was always about how could we make this feel realistic? And her performances are so rich and nuanced and feel so realistic that the world around her has to frame that. And so I'm often trying to make sure we encourage people. Here's a good analogy is that like when you do a hospital design or a hospital set, everybody wants to make the bed. Like everybody does. Every single person who walks into a hospital set wants to make the bed.
right.
And most beds in hospitals are not made. If patients have been in them they're just
Yeah,
not made. They're messed up. And so take that analogy and apply it to a TV set. Because it's on TV, everything has to be like perfectly placed, which is not necessarily how reality is. And so it's finding that line that I say that's TV real and real real. And I'm always trying to push the show to be a little more real because Kathy's performance deserves that. And I feel as a production designer, it's kind of my duty to match. I can't match her performance. That's not what I'm saying. To match and frame her so that it feels like the right context.
yeah.
That's, you
I have a lot of like that same feeling of like people's desks and like making it look real and everything, and then oh, there's too much on the desk. Take half of that out, or like we don't need all that. Or I've run into a lot lately of taking lamps out, taking lamps off of desks because we can't shoot. Well, everybody has a desk lamp. She, I said, I've recently gotten into an argument of like, there's 75 years of television, and all of these people, all of these great Sipowicz had a desk lamp. Like someone figured out how to shoot it with a desk lamp. Like, why are you taking my desk lamps out? Like, it's reality. That's the nuggets of why we're there to give this personality through dressing. And then
it's
we
a
don't need all
hundred
that. It's insulting.
I would agree with you, and I have had that same argument out loud and in my head 100 times in my head. Like I think about if you watch stuff from the 70s, camera came around candelabras and lamps and
Yeah. Yeah.
candles and I mean even in 6 Feet Under, I've been rewatching 6 Feet Under and like the camera comes around that. And
Mm.
I can't necessarily blame a DP. That's not, I don't want this to be misconstrued or out of context. I also think it's the style. We pay so much money for actor faces, we want nothing in front of them. That's kind of where I'm
Yeah.
at.
Yeah, you're right.
But at the same time, if we're trying to reflect reality, which we might not be doing right now, like that might not be the era of what entertainment is. People say they want it real and they want it earthy, but it's not that real and earthy. I mean, if you watch TikToks, even, they're not that real. They've been manicured and
Yeah.
we're in a timeline right now where things are a little bit more upgraded from what we would say reality is. But TikTok, when it first started, and I pick on that because people were filming them in their showers and in their bathrooms.
Right, right. No one was
And
doing their makeup at first.
exactly. And now they have all this other thing. Anyway, that got off track. But
Yeah, but
uh,
yeah.
the, the
Sorry.
lamp thing is a sensitive subject because it's true. It's like where is the line between reflecting reality and telling a story? And on Matlock, we are telling a story. And so I oftentimes, the judge's desk is the perfect example. Judges' desks and lawyer tables are incredibly busy and full of information. Now, with screens and cables and briefcases and all sorts of stuff. And if you look at that picture right there,
Yeah.
but maybe lawyers do look like that. Maybe there's certain ones, but if you look, that's not what they look like when you see real court cases. And also court cases happen over, days and times and months and, years, and ours happen in a matter of minutes, generally speaking. So that's where I kind of say, that's okay, everybody. We're telling a story. We're not reflecting reality. We
Yeah.
want to reflect it enough that you connect to it and you identify with it. But it's the same way that when a musical number starts in a musical and everyone starts dancing, you don't say, well, that's not real.
Right.
You
I mean,
know,
it'd
like
be uncomfortable, but it's
yeah. So like we're telling a story. And I look back at another law drama, one of the best, in my opinion, was Ally McBeal. And Ally
um,
McBeal was such a good reminder that like life can be fantastical. And so this show is doing it in a gameplay, clue, story mode, emotional mode. And the design does that too, I guess is the bottom line on that.
well, what was the choice for the color palette of like these gorgeous jewel tones that you have? I'm gonna get back to her office, to Shay's office. I mean, it's a jewel box in every sense of like the gold and the colors playing off of the metals and did you was
Yeah, it's
that
it's
and
very
obviously intentional, but like was that talked about of what this needed to be?
Yeah, for sure. There's this early conversation that kind of evolved. Jenny Erman, of course, has a very clear vision about the way certain things operate. And I'm going to say the word gameplay, that like, Olympia, Julian, Maddie, Senior, Billy, Sarah, they are pieces in a puzzle. And at the time of the early pilot, we didn't I mean, Jenny may have known, but we didn't know where the series was going or how it was going to end. I didn't know how it was going to end until it ended, truthfully. Like we never
Wow.
really knew where the show was headed. But we knew that it was a game and we knew that we wanted the audience to participate at home and it's working. I mean, I go home and my
Yeah.
mom's yoga class is like saying, oh, well, I think this will happen or I think this will happen. And so in order to help the audience, they're slightly color coded. Olympia is green, Julian is blue, Senior is oxblood, and
Mm,
they were incredibly helpful design guides. It's like if you said you're going to make your party a luau, it informs all the things that you need, right? You need
right.
tropical plate settings, you need beautiful flowers, so that when you say that Senior is oxblood and we look at this picture, you can see where that came from. Like it just kind of informed the way that the set and the show operates. And then the second layer on top of that is that when Maddie goes home, we had a softer, more beautiful, kind of a slightly pastoral look to it. And the house itself is its own contained, as you say, jewel box. All that's very precise and it works because it's an instrument of helping this foldology happen. Like, who are you looking at and what world are you in? Because Jenny moves the scripts like a hot potato, in several minutes, you're in several locations. Sorry, in a few minutes, you're in several locations.
Yeah.
Wanted to be very clear to the audience, you are not in the office, you are at her house. So, like, there's these textures and treatments and colors that kind of help you as a viewer sit at home. Because the last thing I want to do in a script that is what could be considered confusing is confuse it more.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
very hard to frame it in a certain way so that like audiences at home can keep playing along and enjoy it.
I really like their bedroom. Didn't get a shot of that, but I really like their bedroom. And I have seen these sets in person. The kitchen set is fantastic. It's fantastically decorated in nooks and crannies and like the spatial that you given it with the built-in and the windows. And it's a really great kitchen set. I have to say
It's
that.
funny that you say that because that is the number one set that people, and I'm saying it's funny because I like it too. Don't get me wrong. I do. I'm very proud of it. I like it. It came from some research from Westchester County, New York. The way the island works. What's funny about that is we're changing it, or we could be changing it because the it becomes unshootable. It's basically a large L and it locks everybody in.
Right,
And that
right.
was a great lesson in, camera work. It infringes the actors too because they can't quite move around freely. And so that was a great lesson in how things move or how things look. But people love that set. It's the one
Yeah.
thing that people comment on. And you just never know what people gravitate to or why they like it. I've actually been reached out to more than once by strangers who found my email address for the ground plan so they could emulate
Oh
it in
my,
their own.
I believe that. It's a great design kitchen. And what it gives the character in those moments is hominess. It gives her that personality at home where like I like the bedroom too and the headboard and everything. And then her like I like it's like a layer where she has like her I always think of it like a murder board or something, but like the kitchen
Yeah.
to me is like, it's always the heart of the home. So it's really it doesn't surprise me that people would want to copy that at all. It's
Well,
great.
what's interesting about that too is that we were out of money by the time we decided that we were going to build that kitchen. And I had proposed that we do it because I didn't like the idea that we were going to trap Maddie inside Maddie's office for an entire season. And even at that time, we
Right.
didn't know there were going to be 18, 19 episodes. So it was like, gosh, audience fatigue. And I'm very aware of that. I don't want the audience to be bored, which is why we changed the courtroom so many times. And that's an uphill battle we can talk about too. But the kitchen was a three-wall set, and that is why it's designed the way that it is, because I wanted to force everyone to be shooting always at the sink and the refrigerator with the kitchen table in the front because we didn't have money for the reverse. So it came out of budget essentially. And
Mm,
then as the show developed and we learned to love the kitchen and everybody wanted to shoot in there, we ended up developing what would be the fourth wall, and you rarely see it.
right.
But I found that the reason why it was designed and the look is all because it was a sitcom set, and I was trying to basically use my theater roots and make a kitchen that could be in the world of All My Sons or some of these more
Right.
dramatic, pieces. And then the reason why the coloration of the bedroom is the way that it is because the show has so much going on. You're about to go to sleep usually or waking up, and so it's a monochromatic palette when no other set has that. And that's basically my dinner mint to the audience to kind of clear their palate so that they can get ready for the next day because it usually is the instrument to be like, okay, we're moving on to the next plot.
Yeah, it definitely influences the eye and the scenes that they have in there and like their conversations and it definitely influences like you're saying like all right, keep calm down. Calm down. Like we're gonna get back to the pace in a second, but calm down.
Yeah.
It's a great tool to use.
And the office kind of does something similar. Our DP has to work very hard to light
Yeah,
that set because it's so dark. The blue color is so dark it's almost,
I know.
it almost doesn't exist. And it's a struggle because part of the reason why it's successful is because it's a dark layer. And if you think about what's going on in the show, she's Bruce Wayne. So she's,
Right.
a superhero and she's got this incredible mansion and that's her bat cave. And so it's hard for me to say, okay, let's change it.
Yeah.
Uh, but it works and it's another one of those. There's a lot of plot that usually happens in the office, but it is another palate cleanser because you usually are in the office when you need to focus the audience in on something.
I hope that doesn't change because it is a moment when she's in there and very focused as part of like the dialogue and the storytelling. It's very this is why we're here type thing. Um, do you want to start talking about how you are a genius and using sets? Everyone should pay attention now. Uh, using sets that have gone through three different versions but look completely different. And it's a genius move and responsible move for, being aware of waste and reusability in our industry is very important. And I really applaud you for being able to do this and being and not I'm sure you are in a sense like I want to build this, I want to build this, but there's also such a challenge that you gave yourself to use same walls and same pieces to configure to a whole new show. It's amazing. It really is.
Thank you.
Bravo.
I'll start. Thanks. I'll start by saying that it's, this idea. Well, okay, so if I wanted to be a fine artist, I would go to paint art and I would be in a museum. working in television is not that. It's a full jam band experience.
It's problem solving.
Problem solving, and like when the drummer gives you a backbeat or the bassist brings you in with the bass line, you have to improv, and you say yes and you go. I guess that's basically the basis of jazz. And so when Good Sam, which is the picture on the far, that's the patient room, that was a show on CBS. um, when it was going to happen, it started during COVID, and so the form of all of the sets you're seeing in this kind of combo platter of scenery all came from an environmentally sound building, a real building. So all of the architecture and the way the ceiling looks
Mm,
and the way the windows are laid out came from UTM, which was a university campus in Toronto, from a LEEDs, certified environmentally friendly building. So I found that to be interesting, part one. And so we took this location for Good Sam and we turned it into a stage set. And there was a lot of ambition around Good Sam that it could be the next ER or the next big medical drama.
yeah.
And so there was a lot of gusto and enthusiasm out of building all the sets. Plus, you had nine main actors, essentially. I think it was nine, it might have been seven. You had obviously, Jason Isaacs and Sophia Bush as your leads, but you had all these storylines. So it was very soap opera. So you had a lot of scenery because you had a lot of story to tell. And so we built a lot. And when that series was tragically cut, ended after season one, it was Frank Siracusa and John Weber who run Wiseacre, which is I think their companies are different names now, but that's who came to me and said, what do we think about changing this? And at that time, they didn't say what it was. They just said, what could it be? And I said, well, there's several Star Treks happening in Toronto. We could make it a spaceport. We could make it something. I mean, it could be an FBI office. It could be I pitched a used car dealership or a car dealership. When you drive down the 101 and you go
Yeah.
like
All those,
Calabasas, like,
yeah.
yeah, I was like, I don't know what shows are out there. And believe it or not, like 2 weeks later, Frank called me and he was like, "Hey, there's a show that we think this could work." And so I didn't have long. I know that. I think I had 3 days, maybe four. And so I had to put some assemblage, some collages together to interview with Jordan Nardino and Cameron Tarlow, who were doing Glamorous. They wouldn't let me watch the pilot that had been made, which they were dumping and they were starting over. So that's the middle image. And so that became the headquarters for the makeup that we used in that show. And that was the art department right there in that center picture. And so those pictures were taken in the same location because I knew at that time, wow, I was able to make a hospital, headquarters in Hudson Yards for a makeup company. And then that show got canceled during the strike, like many shows did. And it was
Which
such a
I'm bummed. I really like that show.
I did too, actually. There
That
was a
was
lot
good.
going on that show that I thought was worth exploring a second season, and it is a bummer. Also, it was different, and I will say I'm very
Yeah.
proud of Netflix for taking on a gay-friendly pride, LGBTQ, however you want to call it, movie, and they gave it the same budget. So many what I would call diversification projects get 12 cents to make their project. And then we say, oh, look, we're giving opportunity to artists who are, underprivileged or whatever phrases you want to say. I hope I'm not offending anybody. But like, they don't seem to get the same funding. But I can look back at Glamorous and I can say Netflix tried. They really did. And I like that they did that. So then when that was sitting during the strike, it was the construction coordinator, Joe Maziak, who built, both of, these shows you're looking at on the right. He was like, oh my gosh, basically they're going to throw it away. And so between him and Toronto and Frank and John and then me at CBS, and I had a lot of work to do. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of phone calls and a lot of emails to say, please don't, please don't, please don't throw it away. Not just for premise of making Matlock a better show, but because it was the right thing to do when you sit through HR meetings and they tell you how
Right.
environmentally friendly and sound they are. Like we can't, it's beyond saving plastic water bottles, okay? This is
Right.
like, just look at this picture. There's like 14 windows right there, and all
Color,
that is real aluminum and glass.
glass,
Then the far
marble,
picture, the one on the left, is
flooring.
same set rebuilt at Paramount. And for those people who are really paying attention, if you look behind Billy's head, you can see it's much shorter than where it would be on Glamorous. And Good Sam, because the soundstage at Paramount is 75 feet shorter. So we had to cut a lot of that
Oh my
set out.
God.
So there was a lot more set actually in Toronto.
It is an amazing, and I love that you gave me these comparison shots for the sets because you do. I mean, I looked at them and was like a detective of like, oh, okay, there's the same wall. The wall, we're looking at the hospital room, and the wall with like the wallpaper with a wave on it is the one with the glamour shots in the back, and then you made it wood tone for a Matlock and have artwork on it, but it's an amazing transformation from hospital to, office. It's really a crazy thing too of how much they all have in common in a sense. But
Yeah, well, it's a good study. Like I said, the science experiment. It's a
yeah,
good study in what your audience will forgive and forget. And those are two important things that I've been looking at more critically as budgets get tighter and as needs get more demanding. What will audiences forgive and forget? And that is hard because you only have your own brain and people's reviews to go off of. You don't know, I don't know what it's like for you to sit and watch a TV show in your own mind. So we have to, that's where gathering on the fireplace kind of becomes important because we have to kind of talk about what it is that I ask a lot of people, like what is it that you like about Matlock? And, if they kind of come back to the same thing. So yeah, that's three of the same shots. A waiting room in Good Sam, a breakfast or lunchy area on Glamorous, and then the meeting room. One of the challenges, and this is just every show goes through this, because real estate on a soundstage is so expensive. I mean, it's so expensive to run a soundstage. The backings always get pressed up against the glass. They just do
yeah,
because you can't afford to have
afford
25
15
feet.
feet and
Yeah.
you're back.
And that's 11 feet right there. So that's like beyond too close.
Yeah.
And that reads, but the lesson that I've learned is that, and these are stills, the visual effects department can't always solve it, but they often help it. So like when it airs, it tends to look more soft or diffused, or they add flying birds, or they have a plane cross or
Yeah,
something like that. And it
lights
somehow
flicker and stuff. I mean, the stuff that they do is quite amazing. Just in simple shots that you don't think about, and you're like, oh, they gave that life back there. That's really nice. Um, and then another comparison, we have offices here and using the windows and just how even the drapery and not drapery and the flooring is different and how you're able to again transform to three different shows is really phenomenal.
it just yeah, it
Phenomenal.
comes out of economic, and like you said, you give yourself a challenge, 100 podcasts. It's not that I gave myself the challenge, it's that I just decided that that was the only way, It's
Yeah.
like if you're really stoned or really drunk and you open the refrigerator and you want a quesadilla, you're going to make a quesadilla.
Yeah.
That's basically
Gotta
how
figure it
I
out.
scaled this out.
I I wonder though with this, you built it for the pilot in Toronto.
Yeah.
And then you thankfully moved it to LA. You lost space, so you had to redesign there and reconfigure. But in the process of configuring it from Glamour to Matlock, did you feel like you had enough money or budget to like really make it different? Because it does look completely different with the wood that you've added everywhere.
Can you go to the staircase image? I think that's the if you have that one. I can't remember if I sent it to you or not.
Yeah,
Yeah, this
yeah,
one.
yeah.
Um, Interesting. Okay, so I got to talk a little bit about theme for a second. So, like, the theme of Glamorous was all about the actress, either the character that Kim Cattrall was playing, Madeline Matlock. Sorry, not Madeline Matlock. It isn't. Oh my gosh, I just
No,
realized
it's
that
Marilyn.
it's Madeline
Madeline.
and
Yeah,
it's
Maddie.
Maddie. Wow, I just realized that for the first time. I can't believe that. Hold on. So I knew that. Okay, it's a hard question to answer because I do not think that Glamorous or Matlock would look the way they do if it wasn't for Good Sam. And
Mm,
I didn't realize the good decisions that, Katie Wesh was the showrunner then and Joe Maziak, construction coordinator. These decisions were made in 2020. So we're
wow.
making decisions that are now 5 years old and they're still paying off.
Right.
And so to answer your question, would if I had to start from scratch, I think is what you're saying, Matlock, the series would look completely different and it would look much smaller. And
Hmm.
one of the things that is so important to me is that from a theme standpoint, Maddie's world is constantly building out and up because we are learning and she is learning, and it's getting more complicated and harder every time. So, what started off as the stairway to nowhere, where this gentleman is walking up the steps, that was formerly, this big advertisement for Maddie in Glamorous, and then the hub. You see the nurse's station at the bottom of the stairs in this image. This wouldn't Matlock wouldn't have this. I'm almost guaranteeing that. And the reason why we did it on Good Sam is because we had 7 or 8 doctors who were always rushing to the hospital nurses station. So you needed a lot of crossroads. So if you look at that, you can come left, right,
Yeah.
up or down or around the corner. So that instrument is affecting all of these other shows. And I think the best way to answer the question is that there's no way I could have designed Matlock to look like it did if it wasn't for this method.
Right. I mean, it is a real lesson here of how transformation, and I think a lot of this is, like theater design and using flats and you've talked to me about like when you did different courtrooms and just using different walls and configuring them different. And I don't even know how many courtrooms you had, but
We did 18 and
nine.
we did 18 and a lot of people have been like, "Oh, I didn't notice." And I actually don't mind that comment. Like it's not about necessarily noticing as much as subconsciously making sure audiences don't get fatigued. The show it wants you to be alive, alert, and enthusiastic. That, it wants you to pay attention to it. It's just the nature of the way Jenny created it. So the courtroom, it does look similar, but Manhattan is a really big place. Brooklyn is a big place. Queens is a really big place. Lots of courtrooms are brown wood, and gold and brass are popular right now. So that's kind of the on trend part of it. And also, our courtroom stories are vehicles to draw parallels to Maddie's story. I mean, they're almost always, every court
I
case is
agree.
actually usually a bookend to what's happening on the other end of the story. And so I'm always trying to make sure I'm moving things around in the show. And it sounds like you're picking that up. Subconsciously, the show is going, okay, the show's always moving. So the scenery is too. It's
No.
easy to cut that. That's another thing too, is that it's very easy to cut it. It costs money. And so there are times when I have to say, well, maybe we don't do as big of a change this time, but I always feel the need to do the change. And that just comes from instinct to kind of be like, I mean, Boston Legal, I watched a lot of Boston Legal to get ready for the show, which was really fun, by the way.
Hmm.
Um, they had 2 courtrooms and they would just kind of ping pong back and forth. But
Right.
after a while, you kind of get to the feeling, at least I did, that these courtrooms must just be like around the corner from their
Right.
office.
Right. Yeah.
But Manhattan's not like that, it's a bigger place.
But I didn't realize it when I was watching it. It's because you told me about the configurations that you would do and walls up and down and but I just really was like, oh, they're in a different courtroom every time. Like this is crazy. Been thinking of it like work-wise, but story-wise and just sitting there and watching the show, it made sense that they go to different courtrooms because there are a lot of courtrooms. And I mean, I've been in City Hall in Philadelphia and there's like 100 different courtrooms. Like it's like crazy. So yeah, I don't, it didn't it I think it helped a lot that they were in different courtrooms and it gave different moods to each case. So
Yeah, I wish that I could lower in a ceiling and make some of them look like they were in a basement, or I would love to make them all look like, I'd love to make them look more realistic by
real
having
pretty.
them be beige and kind of placid and more tempered. But there's an aspirational quality to this show that it's a
Yeah.
fantasy at the end of the day. It's a fantasy. So we also are looking at that, and the jewel box metaphor, which I'll steal from you, is a real part of the show. And I'm always trying to kind of dangle the keys in front of the audience, kind of, look at us. And the courtrooms can't be too boring or people won't pay attention to them.
Do you have a favorite transformation set? Do you have like pat yourself on the back of anything that you took from Good Sam and Glorious? Like, is there or Glorious?
Glamorous. I love, if you go back to the one that has the circle light in the center,
Yeah.
The use of all of this has really made me happy. And it's not, I mean, yeah, I think it looks good. I'm happy about that. Don't get me wrong.
Okay.
But because the DPs on all of the shows, and if we add up all the DPs, it's gosh, it's 70 Ps, 60 Ps. I mean, these sets have now been on television 19 plus 9 plus, 14 or something like that. So they've been on TV a lot. And part of the reason why the actors look so good is that ring light. And it's basically a monster ring light, which came inspired from, social media filming yourself. And I just put it on the ceiling. Also, it's trendy right now. I mean, there's a lot of ring lights in casinos and hospitals and places like that. But to
I'm
have one on that scale, um,
trying to zoom into this Matlock one because it's different. You've used I can't do it. You've used it differently than the other two versions because it doesn't encompass just one space. Like you've made it into, I mean, look, right?
yeah, it's a racetrack. Yeah. And I turned it from a circle into a racetrack
Yeah.
from one set to the other. And, even changing the ceiling color from wood to white basically acts like a bounce.
Yeah.
And there's your reflection again because the world is upside down for Maddie. That's not just convenient. That's a real choice. There's a couple of sets that have ceilings upside down because I'm just waiting for the DPs to need that moment when we see the world through Maddie's eyes when things
Yeah.
are turning.
Yeah. No, it's a great choice. I love the reflective ceiling, like the glossy ceiling that you have there.
And then kind of going back, 30 minutes in conversation, the color coding, there's a little bit of shape going on. You can't really see it unless you're looking, for instance, if you go back to Senior's office, which is the one with the seersucker suit.
Yeah.
So like his
Oh,
his desk is on a triangle. One more. Yeah. His desk back there is actually triangulated and his walls are leaning in because the walls are falling in on him. The walls are closing in on these characters. That's a choice. That's not just looks good. There's a reason for that.
mm,
And then Julian, his son, is a perfect square. And I did that on purpose because, well, not, I shouldn't say it's a perfect square. It's square, it's 90 degrees, so that you have these opposite environments going on. And that was because at the time, I wasn't sure how gaming we were going. I've learned after 19 hours of the story when I only had 60 minutes of the story when I started and made a lot
right.
of
Right.
decisions. So I wanted to make sure I always had more to deal with so that if it ever did get really puzzly, like a Rubik's Cube, I had the design foundation laid to kind of pull that card, just like the story does.
It's so interesting how much we have to go on. And like when you don't have the script, I mean, you have inclinations and people, the writers or the showrunner will give you maybe like, "Oh, I could go this way, could," but really like on something like this, when you don't have the who done it, it's it's amazing the design choices that you made that really lend to, well, he did it. Like I don't know. Like, you know
Well,
what
yeah, I mean, if you look behind this picture's head, there's a door there. That door goes to nowhere. I put that door there for a purpose because eventually I was like, there needs to be a creepy entrance. There's going to be a surprise. And then, but right to what would be our right, there's a hidden shelf back there. And I've told Jenny, like, this is where the gun is. This is where his ashes, or this is where his grandmother's ashes are. Like, who knows where the show could go? There's no gun in
right.
the show, by the way. There's no guns at all. I think that's one of the reasons why I love working with Jenny Erman is because the policemen don't even get guns. Like there's no guns, there's no weapons in the show. And I like that. It's so easy for a showrunner or a writer to say, "Oh, he pulls out a gun." Like doesn't work that way in this world, and I like that. So anyway, the point of what I'm saying is that when I was designing this, I was like, I have to design for mystery. Where does the clue come from, even if
Right.
there's never a clue? So that is the reason why that door is there.
So how much prep time did you have for Matlock?
I had 18 days in the pilot, and then I had 6 weeks. Sorry, we built all the sets in LA in 6 weeks, and I had 2 weeks before that to get ready.
That's a good, I mean, that's a good chunk. That's a
Yeah,
good
six,
chunk.
7, 8. So I had 8 weeks, and then this season, there were 8 weeks as well, which I was grateful of because one of the things that happens, and I think anybody who's worked in television, especially 1 hour drama, when you get to the end of a series, your photos, your files, you try with best intention to keep everything organized and
Yeah.
straight. And at the end of a season, it just becomes a deal with this later because if the show gets canceled, why should I spend all my time in my life sorting it
Exactly.
out and figuring it out? And so when the show got, when we knew and we were started, I had a lot of homework to do to kind of get my brain wrapped around everything. Also, my short-term memory is pretty good, and in certain incidences, like you could point to me at one point and be like, "What was Eleanor's front door color on The Good Place?" And I could tell you, and I could actually find it in a book and be like, "This is what it is."
Red?
All those memories are gone. And I'm sure you're the same way. You're like, what sofa is
Blue?
in, what
Yeah.
sofa was in, so and so's. Like, yeah, I bet you could tell me exactly what was in Michael's office on The Good Place. And
Yes.
I actually don't remember. I'd have to see a picture to look at it. But I have to refresh my memory because I become the local expert and directors who come in are visiting directors and they'll be like,
Yeah.
is there a cocktail table outside the coffee bar area? And I can't be like, well, let me look over a picture. The prep time is so condensed. I feel the pressure to be like, yes, it is, or here's a picture.
I mean
Whereas
that's so true about like every director that comes in, the designer walks the sets with them and gives them a lay. We usually come down here and this is a great show. We've never been over here. If that's an opportunity for you, like you really try to, you're almost selling the set to every director. I feel like the designer is like, this is where they congregate. Like especially if it's something that hasn't aired yet and they're only getting clips or like dailies and stuff, like piecing it together and you're selling your interpretation of like, hey, this is where the murder plot could be, this is where the weapon could be or something. Like there's such a like protectiveness that we have with our sets and telling directors, sometimes begging directors of like how to shoot it right or like please take advantage of this and they have so much more to deal with storytelling and actors and everything, but I
I
always love
I
that
think
time that you get.
on top of that, I would say that like you know a set so well, you know what the thread count is on the sheet. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? They don't know anything about it. They
right,
don't.
right.
And that's stressful. I mean, the idea that a director can come in with now 7 days of prep, actually sometimes even
Yeah,
six,
yeah,
and pull a episode of, 47 minutes of a hit TV show out of thin air with a lot of team support. But like I want my sets to be flexible, diverse, tell a story, and I need them to understand it. And the best way to do that is to walk them through it and say, hey, let's just pay attention to the parts that you need to pay attention to today, and then you'll learn the set over the next couple of days. Because it can be overwhelming. I mean, there's a lot of scenery packed onto stage 8 and 9 at Paramount, a lot of
there's a
scenery. And
lot.
it turns and it flips. And I'm always impressed with directors like Tessa Blake and Jude Wang who just figure it out. And Maria, like they all, but like some of them can really like, I'm always impressed because I'm like, oh, you were speed dating right now.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. And they have so much to deal with the actors, and their entrance and exits and what are they doing and what's in the scene, what are we doing in the scene. There's so many things that come up, and I always find it funny, like when it's the art department meeting and they start talking about tone or something, and I'm like, that's not this meeting. Like, I'm very like, okay, that's sidebar that I need our meeting now. Like,
I want to poke at this picture actually because I
yeah, the
wanted to talk
conference
about
room.
something because this has been, we talked about color. A lot of people have been the show is very, very color timed at the end of it. Like the way that I see the last, cut gets
Yeah,
changed again before it airs. So when I'm watching it, when it's airing or about when it's airing, I'm actually pleasantly surprised. But what's fun about this image is the design is speaking to you, right? Because it's Olympia's world. She's at the head of the table. The
yeah,
orange is reflecting she's in a pool of it, and the green is framing her. And that's where I love the DP because he's using the tools that were, Tim Steppick, the decorator, he really wanted these flowers. And I was like, I don't know if a law firm would have them when I first saw them. Yeah, but sure. And it works. It works so beautifully well. And then, Maddie looks like an outsider. And that comes from Hope Hennepin, the costume designer, really working together with me. She was I thought, very fun to work with because she was paying attention to those details.
yeah. Because there's such a the their wardrobe does play off of the sets very well in this, and they either pop or they blend in, and that you could tell that it's a choice, which is really. interesting too when you're going through all these characters because there's a lot of people coming in and out in every episode too, although the caseworker, no,
Mhm.
it's fantastic. What's been what's the fun part? I mean, obviously it's Kathy Bates, but like
Oh yeah, I want to tell. I definitely want to tell an anecdote about that in a
yeah.
second. I would say the fun part, it happened just yesterday, actually. We were developing a new potential semi-permanent set, and sorry if you hear my cat meowing.
Mm.
Uh, and Marcel, the construction coordinator, came in, and then Renee, who is part of the backlot team for Paramount, came into my office, and Rob Cook, our painter, came in, and it was like we were actually, jam banding and developing an idea together, and picking out wallpaper and paint color is only like 2% of the job. There's so much
Yeah.
more that goes on. And in fact, the more I get into production design, the more I feel like it's a lot of politicking. And I don't mean that badly. It's like negotiating money, negotiating time, negotiating schedule, negotiating wants, negotiating needs, disappointment management. All those things are design related, but they're not the fun part. And the fun part right now for me is bringing people together and seeing like how can we make this, and how do I you see your talent, I see your talent, how do I use that like an instrument? And I've been enjoying that. It's not my design, it's our design, and I have been enjoying that a lot. The story about Kathy Bates is gonna live with me for a really long time. So it was, week 2 or week 1 of filming the first uh, our second episode in LA. And we had 6 weeks of prep from the day that we started putting, hammers, and we started swinging. So 6 weeks for all the scenery you just showed was unbelievable.
That's really crazy.
It was crazy. And, I look back and go, how could I manage that differently? I don't really know. But we did it and it happened. And so we were in Maddie's kitchen for the first time. And I saw that set lit and done for the first time the moment that it shoot. There was no, I mean, Peg Casey, who dressed it, I mean, we were all just moving as fast as we possibly can and relying on our talent. And I came into the set to look at it lit. And I got stuck in the doorway with a cameraman with this camera in front of me and behind me. And who got stuck in the doorway with me but Kathy Bates? And this is the first time I've seen her since the pilot. She
Mm.
actually, I saw her on the pilot. I spoke to her, but it was very, very brief. And so now we're stuck in a door jam, and I am 6'2.5", and she is 5'2". So she's looking at my belly button essentially. And she pokes a flamingo on my shirt, and she says, "I like flamingos too." And I said, well, I like flamingos, pterodactyls, and toucans, I think in that order. And by the time I finished it, the cameras moved and off Kathy Bates went. 4 or 5 days later, I come into my office and her driver is filming me and has a card in her hand, and I think I could find it actually. Has a card in her hand, and it says Kathy Bates on the card. And she said to me, Kathy always signs her card with her name on the front, but this is for you. And I opened it up and it said from one flamingo lover to another, but the word flamingo wasn't the Latin word for what it is, and I'm forgetting what it is right now. And there was a giant flamingo sculpture that Kathy was giving me with very nice compliments about the scenery. And it was such an incredible bond moment, relationship moment that like
Yeah.
I've never had an actor do that before. And so we put it up on a pedestal, we light it, it's still lit. The
Yeah.
light never
I've
goes
seen
out on
it.
the flamingo.
It's
And
awesome.
the best part of it is that we named it Tawanda, and she came in a couple days later wearing a red robe like coat that was dragging on the ground. And I said, we named it Tawanda. And she held her hands up and she yelled Tawanda just like she did in Fried Green Tomatoes. And
Oh,
we all could have passed out right there. So I didn't mean to make that story so long, but it's such a fun
no,
moment.
that is such a great moment for because I think a lot of people think that we interact a lot with actors or like we get it, but it's not. It's we don't I don't really interact with anyone really. I mean, here and there or like they like that or hey, they have a question about this. It's kind of rare. But I think with designers and actors too, like you sometimes get to like show them the sets and I like show them this is your office and everything. And I kind of like stand in the background of like, yeah, I did all that too. But when
Well,
you get a moment and she is relating to you, and appreciating everything that you did for the set. That's awesome. That's just
Yeah,
awesome.
it really was. It was very, very fun. There was one other thing I was going to say, but I can't remember. It was kind of what you were, the actors. Oh, I find it interesting too that, you slave over what goes on that actor's desk or what is behind them as artwork. And I don't understand how if someone were to design this office for me and I just had to come in and act my
Yeah,
guts
I
out,
know.
not even know what that is. I always find that very interesting how that disconnect. They trust us, and that's what that says to me, that the actors are trusting that the art department is going to tell the story around them.
Yeah.
And
Well, the thing that I've come to learn, number one, is don't ask the actors. And number two is because you're going to get an answer you're not prepared for or you don't agree with a lot of the times. But and it might not be achievable, and then you just feel like, oh shit, they wanted this and we can't afford it or get it in time or whatever. But the other thing is that you are starting months before they start. And like we have so much prep time, not so much, but we have more prep time a lot of times than the actors to get to know this character and create their backstories and create their environments. Especially with, it's people coming in episodically or, a short story arc, like that's us,
Mhm.
really.
It's
That's
a lot of throwing darts and hoping they hit the bullseye. That's how I feel. And I'm 50% wrong most of the time because the camera never looks the other way. And that's
I
just
know.
the way it goes. And you just kind of have to learn that that's part of the process, And you can talk about it all you want, but if a really great acting moment or lighting moment happens to happen and the camera turns the other way, I used to get really disappointed by that to a certain degree, and now I don't anymore. It's just part of the job.
I do. I get very disappointed. And I tell them I'm very disappointed. You didn't see that book
Yeah,
over
but
there.
that's
They're
why
like,
you're who you are. Like I love that spirit about you. And you inspire me to be more proactive
"Mm,
about that stuff and say what the fuck more, like
oh,
truthfully.
oh, yeah." Because it is like, oh, you have this great lamp, like it just as a lamp conversation. You have this great lamp and you never turned it on? Why didn't you turn it? Why didn't you turn it on? Like, things like that. And
Yeah.
simple things like that of like,
Well, I had to change Olympia's sink faucet out in because
oh,
we got a designer fancy, she's
yeah,
got
I
lots of
have it.
money. We
Yeah.
changed it out because it was getting in the way. And there was a moment where I was like, okay, all right.
It was too high
Yeah, it was too
at it.
high. It
Uh,
was, it was like gooseneck style, so the new one that we got. But that's lessons that I learned, you just
yeah.
don't always know. And sometimes you get it right too. So like, by the way, the favorite piece of dressing in this picture is that lamp underneath the MA and Matlock.
This,
Yeah.
yes. This was that
That was the
sure.
Carolyn G from Toronto. She put that in there and I squealed with delight because look, it's all the things. It's black and white
Yeah,
contrast.
it's
It's
great.
lamp. Yeah.
And it's not too much. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? It's very modern. It's very nice, but still has a great function.